I've lost count of how many times I promised myself that next year everything will be different. It always started with excitement. I'd buy planners, set goals, but before February was even over, I already felt exactly like the version of me I swore I'd leave behind. It was hard to admit. It wasn't a lack of desire. It was a lack of method. I tried to change everything at once, and in the end, changed nothing. The turning point came when I realized transformation doesn't need a whole year. In just 120 intentional and consistent days, I could barely recognize myself in the mirror. And it wasn't just my appearance. It was the way I thought, acted, and made choices. A new identity was being born before my own eyes. 2026 can be just another year on the calendar, or it can be the moment you decide to completely reinvent yourself. In this script, I'll show you how these 120 days can be the trigger for your unrecognizability. And you'll realize it's not about waiting for the right time, but about creating your time now. If you're ready to become unrecognizable in 2026, hit that like button, subscribe, and come with me, because your turning point starts today. Pillar 1. Recognizing your starting point with brutal honesty. The first time I truly sat down to see where I was, it was uncomfortable. I wanted to see myself as more organized, more prepared, stronger, but the numbers, the habits, the choices, they screamed otherwise. And for a long time I ran from that. I created distractions. I made excuses. I preferred believing I was almost there, instead of facing how far I still was. But it's impossible to become unrecognizable if you don't face who you are today, and that was my turning point. I grabbed a notebook and wrote, "What is my life really like right now?" No filters, no sugarcoating. I listed my debts, unnecessary expenses, fears, and self-sabotaging behaviors. It hurt, but it was also freeing, because when the truth is laid bare, the next step becomes clear. You can't fool yourself anymore. You can't live in illusion. It's like turning on the light in a messy room. Suddenly you see where to start cleaning. Looking back now, I see that this simple act of honesty with myself was what created space for everything to change. I didn't need to judge myself, I just needed to face myself. Comment: I choose the truth about myself. If you've also realized that transformation begins when we stop running from reality. Pillar 2. Creating a clear vision of the woman you want to be in 120 days. When I decided I didn't want to repeat the same cycles anymore, the first thing I did was imagine who I wanted to become. And I realized that for years I only said vague things. I want to be better. I want to change. I want to succeed. But what did that even mean in practice? Nothing. It was so broad that it didn't move me. So I stopped. I took a blank page and wrote down in detail who I wanted to be in 120 days. How I woke up. How I dressed. How I spoke. What habits felt effortless. What patterns I refused to tolerate anymore. And how I felt when I looked in the mirror. It wasn't about distant dreaming. It was about creating a possible version of myself, challenging enough to pull me forward. It was about clarity, and clarity gives direction. With every decision, I asked myself, does this bring me closer to or further from the woman I'm building? That one question became my filter for everything. Friendships, money, routine, priorities. Over time, I realized it wasn't me trying to fit into this new woman. It was me allowing her to emerge. And the clearer the vision, the easier it was to sustain the steps, even on hard days. Comment: I already see the woman I'm creating. If you've also decided to design the unrecognizable version of yourself that 2026 will reveal. Pillar 3. Building small, consistent habits that fuel transformation. At the start of my journey, I fell into the trap of wanting to change everything at once. Wake up at 5 a.m. Train every day, cut all expenses, read a book a week. It looked good on paper, but after a week, I was exhausted, frustrated, and worse, feeling incapable. That's when I understood. Transformation doesn't happen in giant leaps, but in small steps that don't go backward. What I needed was consistency, not temporary intensity. So I chose 3 micro-habits to start with. The first was tracking my expenses, no matter how uncomfortable. The second was moving my body daily, even in simple ways. And the third was writing every morning one sentence that reinforced the woman I wanted to be. These habits didn't change everything in a week. But in 30 days, my energy was different. In 60, I couldn't live without them anymore. And in 120 days, I realized it wasn't about forced discipline. It was about identity. Because with every repeated choice, I reinforced within myself, this is the woman I am now. And that coherence was what sustained my turning point. Comment: my small habits sustain me, if you've also realized that consistency matters more than grand beginnings that don't last. Pillar 4, learning to say no without feeling guilty. One of the things that held me back the most was my struggle to say no. I said yes to invitations I didn't want, to commitments that drained me, to people who knew exactly how to use my goodwill. And every time I accepted something I didn't want, I was saying no to myself. But I didn't realize it. I thought I was being generous, flexible, likable. The problem was that pleasing others left me empty. I came home exhausted, without energy, without money, without focus. And worse, I felt like my life wasn't moving forward because I was too busy living the life others expected of me. The turning point came when I understood that my no was an act of self-respect. When I said no to what weakened me, I was saying yes to what strengthened me. And that exchange changed everything. At first, the guilt was heavy, but I started to notice that the people who got offended by my boundaries never really cared about my well-being, and the ones who truly wanted the best for me understood. Today, my no is clear, firm, and quiet. It doesn't need long explanations or justifications. It's the fruit of the clarity of the woman I'm becoming. Comment: my no is self-care. If you've also decided to stop living to please others and started building boundaries that sustain your new identity. Pillar 5, reprogramming the way you talk to yourself. If there's one thing I've learned in this process, it's that the way I spoke to myself defined everything. Before, my inner phrases were harsh. You always ruin everything. You never manage to keep anything. Look at everyone moving forward while you're stuck. And I thought that critical tone would motivate me, but all it did was crush me. I lived in a cycle of pressure and frustration. That's when I realized, if I didn't change how I talked to myself, no transformation would last. Because the mind doesn't bloom in hostile soil. I needed to replace inner whiplashes with affirmations that pushed me forward. At first it felt weird. Looking in the mirror and saying, "I trust myself," sounded fake. But I kept going. I wrote phrases, repeated mantras, corrected myself when I caught me putting myself down. It was like installing a new system. And little by little, the words started becoming truth. Today, it's not that I never criticize myself anymore, but my inner voice has changed its tone. It doesn't knock me down. It guides me. It reminds me of who I'm becoming. Comment: my inner voice is my ally. If you've also decided to turn self-criticism into fuel for growth. Pillar 6, building an environment that reflects your new self. It took me a while to realize my environment was sabotaging my transformation. My house was overflowing. Clothes I no longer wore, broken objects, piles of paper. It was as if every corner whispered, "You're still the same as before." And how can you build a new identity surrounded by so many old reminders? The same thing happened digitally. I followed accounts that made me feel inadequate. I kept old conversations that only tied me to the past. My phone was a reflection of the mental chaos I wanted to leave behind. That's when I understood. Your environment either pulls you forward or keeps you stuck. So I decided to do a radical cleanup. I decluttered my house, my closet, my desk. I deleted contacts that no longer made sense. I kept around me only what reflected the woman I was creating. The impact was immediate. I felt lighter, more aligned, more connected to my new identity. It wasn't just about aesthetics. It was about energy. My environment became a daily reminder of the life I want to sustain. Comment: my environment reinforces who I am. If you've also decided to align every detail around you with the unrecognizable version of yourself that's being born. Pillar 7, eliminating the rush and respecting the 120-day process. I've always been anxious. I'd start a new habit expecting immediate results. If nothing showed up in a week, I'd think, this doesn't work for me. And then I'd go right back into the same cycle of quitting and starting over. It was painful to realize that this rush was the enemy of transformation. Because changing your identity isn't like changing clothes. It's like rebuilding a foundation, and foundations take time. So I decided to face the 120 days not as a race, but as cultivation. Each morning was a seed. Each completed habit was water. Each conscious choice was sunlight. And slowly I began to see sprouts. Small signs that the new version of me was taking root. The secret was to keep going even on the days when it looked like nothing was happening. Because on the surface, it seemed the same, but underneath, the roots were already getting stronger. That patience gave me consistency, and consistency gave me confidence. Today, I understand that rushing doesn't create depth, and without depth, nothing lasts. Comment: I respect my time to bloom. If you've also decided to let go of the anxiety of results and commit to the process. Pillar 8, taking full responsibility for the woman you'll be in 2026. For a long time, I blamed external factors for what I couldn't achieve. The low salary, the lack of support, the environment, the opportunities that never came. And every time I pointed outward, I handed away my own power. It was liberating and terrifying to realize that the woman I'll be in 2026 depends only on me, not on others, not on circumstances, not on luck. That doesn't mean ignoring difficulties. It means refusing to live as their victim. Because there will always be obstacles. But if I put my life in their hands, I lose my chance to grow. When I took responsibility, everything changed. I started looking for solutions instead of excuses. I swapped complaints for strategy. I decided that every action, no matter how small, was under my control. And the most surprising part? That mindset gave me instant power. Because I didn't need to wait for anything external to begin changing internally. Today, I know my 2026 self already exists. And with every choice I make now, I get closer to her. Comment: I am 100% responsible for the woman I'm creating. If you've also decided to stop outsourcing your destiny and take the wheel of your life. I've tried to change my life many times before and failed. And now I understand why. I wanted transformation to be instant, painless, and recognized by everyone. But the truth is, reinventing your identity isn't a spectacle. It's silent work. It's a choice you make every single day, even when no one is watching. The next 120 days can go by like just another 4 ordinary months, full of distractions, complaints, and repetition. Or they can be the cycle that changes your story. The season where you finally stop repeating yourself and start creating yourself. You don't need to wait for the calendar to flip. You don't need perfect circumstances. You don't need the whole world to believe in you. You just need to decide. And hold that decision long enough until it becomes identity. The woman you'll be in 2026 is already inside you. She just needs you to release her, choose for her, and act like her, even if it doesn't feel natural yet. Because each habit, each boundary, each no, and each conscious decision shapes that version until one day you look in the mirror and realize, I've become unrecognizable. Comment: my countdown has already started if you've also decided to use the next 120 days as your turning point. And of course, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with someone who's also ready to be remembered in 2026 as their best version.